What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and if you were tired of OGL drama, well, guess what? It hasn't stopped. Our good friend over at Gizmodo, Lynn Kodega, has put out another article this morning that has all but confirmed what many of us knew and believed to be true, that without fail, our campaign, hashtag D&D Begone, to cancel your D&D Beyond subscriptions that was started on Thursday, did in fact impact Wizards of the Coast's plans, as well as releasing everything. We did it. We won that miniature battle that still hasn't been officially over yet. And you'll also see that Wizards of the Coast kind of continues to live up to the cartoon villain aspect that we expect them all to be. So consider we're going to take a look through that article. But if you have not canceled your D&D Beyond subscription yet, consider doing so. It seems that money is the only thing that impacts Wizards of the Coast's decisions on anything. So let's just dive right in. So Linda's here says, I was able to speak to former and current WotC employees for this latest piece, and the situation inside the Seattle stronghold is dire. Here's a report on some of what happened in between the OGL 1.1 leak on January 5th and the apology yesterday. Also interesting that they mentioned former WotC employees. Does that mean that some people have already left the company in the midst of all of this? So the article is called Canceled D&D Beyond Subscription Forced Hasbro's Hand. Swift consumer action prompted D&D publisher Wizards of the Coast to scrap licensing updates. The players aren't done yet. So it goes on to say here, WotC broke their silence on Friday, attempting to calm tensions in the D&D community and answer questions that were raised after Gizmodo broke the news about the contents of the draft document last week. In a message titled An Update on the Open Game License, this is the one that I covered in my OGL statements video 2 videos ago. So if you want to see more about that, check that out. Posted on the website for D&D Beyond, the company addressed many of the concerns raised after the leak of the Open Gaming License 1.1 earlier in the week and then walked them back fast. Notable changes include the elimination of royalty structures and the promise to clarify ownership of copyright and intellectual property. Just as a reminder, they said they're removing royalty structures. That doesn't mean there still won't be some sort of a charge. It could be in the form of upfront fees as opposed to a royalty percentage. Again, it's not over. We'll have to wait till we see the 2.0 document to make full judgment, but let's keep going. But it might be too little too late. Despite reassurances from Hasbro subsidiary Wizards of the Coast, may have already suffered the consequences of their week of silence. Multiple sources from inside WotC tell Gizmodo that the situation inside the castle is dire, and Hasbro's concern is less about public image and more about the IP hoard the dragon sits on. This tracks with everything we've seen with leaked emails and whatnot, that they don't care about the customers, they care about the bottom line. Segue here. The bottom line seems to be, after a fan-led campaign to cancel D&D Beyond subscriptions went viral, it sent a message to WotC and Hasbro higher-ups. According to multiple sources, these immediate financial consequences were the main thing that forced them to respond. The decision to further delay the rollout of the new Open Gaming License and then adjust the messaging around the rollout occurred because of a, quote, provable impact on the bottom line. According to those sources, in meetings and communications with employees, WotC management messaging has been that fans are overreacting, meaning us overreacting to the OGL 1.1, to the leaked draft, and that in a few months, nobody will remember the uproar. This also tracks with the leaked emails, or the kind of whistleblowing emails that came from the inside of Wizards of the Coast saying, we are nothing but an obstacle to their money. They hope that they can just bury their head and continue through, and that we'll all forget about it in a month and move on as though nothing happened. Licensees are pushing back. But despite any hopes that this will all blow over, well-known publishers who have previously used the OGL, some almost exclusively, such as Cobalt Press and MCDM, have already put out statements saying that they will either be moving away from all versions of the OGL or explicitly offering up their own gaming licenses for their core games. The, quote, negative impact of implementing the new OGL might be a feature and not a bug for Wizards of the Coast, said Charles Ryan, Chief Operating Officer of Monte Cook Games. A savvy third-party publisher might look at where 5e is in its cycle, he said, and if they were planning 5e products, reconsider their investment. Monte Cook Games released their own open perpetual license for their acclaimed Cypher system last year. Smaller indie presses have pulled together resources to help people make third-party content for small games. Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, for example, released the Resistance Toolkit, a document meant to help ease designers off the 5th edition rules and into writing third-party content for their acclaimed RPG, Spire. One third-party publisher told Gizmodo that they had expected WotC to update the OGL as seen in leaked documents, but not until 2025, during the full release of D&D 1. Now many third-party publishers have moved up their migration timeline following the publicity disaster surrounding the leaked new D&D OGL. This tracks with what I've been hearing for years. I have a couple of videos. I think I have like what is the future of D&D videos from a couple years ago. And this is what I had heard from multiple sources, third-party publishers, was the general consensus was we all thought 6th edition or whatever they were going to call it was not going to have an OGL. What we didn't anticipate was this concept of revoking the existing one and not allowing anybody to make content for the existing OGL 1.0A. I had just assumed, based on kind of the reasoning that we're seeing now, the third-party Kickstarters and all of that, that Wizards of the Coast would have just said, okay, if you want to use one D&D or 6th edition, whatever it is, you have to publish through something like the DM's Guild, where we get our percentage off the top, or you could continue to publish under the 5th edition OGL as it was. And that's what I anticipated we would see. You want to use the new stuff, you got to give us a percentage like the DM's Guild, an established mechanism that already exists, or you could continue to be free to publish under the existing OGL, which is how I thought it was going to go. I never, in any amount of planning and speculating tinfoil hat theory, would I have ever thought we'd be where we are now. But either way. One of WotC's biggest competitors, the independent publisher Paizo, owner of Pathfinder and Starfinder RPGs, is currently spearheading a campaign to create an open RPG creative license, ORC, that would be stewarded by a non-profit foundation. Other publishers, including Kobold Press, Chaosium, and Legendary Games, have already committed to the effort. I made a video on the ORC this morning, came out a little while ago, and it's funny because Pathfinder had announced a while ago that they were actually going to be converting some of their Pathfinder adventures into 5th edition, and I made a video on that basically saying, is Pathfinder done? Is this Paizo kind of bowing their head, bending the knee, and saying, you know what, 5th edition's so popular, it's such a better move for us to just take our old Pathfinder adventures and convert them to 5e because it's the king, right? And that's what I thought was going to happen, honestly. And now I'm going to be advocating for Pathfinder 2e, making content for that kind of stuff going forward because of all of this nonsense. Another third-party publisher who's asked not to be identified told Gizmodo their company has already collaborated with other third-party publishers to mount a legal defense of the original circa 2000 OGL 1.0A. That's another thing that Paizo said. Again, I covered it in the video this morning, and we're going to talk about it here a little bit further, that most people do believe that the intention of the original OGL was not designed to be irrevocable, and that they're ready to take it to court if need be. The OGL 1.1 text and the 2.0 FAQ. Last week, Gizmodo received leaked draft copies of the OGL 1.1, and then a few days later, a frequently asked questions document which referred to an OGL 2.0. This is an important distinction because while an 1.1 would be considered an update to the original 1.0A, calling the new agreement 2.0 may indicate it's being imagined as an entirely new separate agreement. One of the most telling parts of the OGL 2.0 FAQ included a statement that clarified one of the most inflammatory points of the leaked OGL 1.1. Whether or not the original OGL 1.0A would be deauthorized. The leaked FAQ said that, quote, OGL 1.0A only allows creators to use authorized versions of the OGL, which allows Wizards to determine which of its prior versions to continue to allow use of when we exercise our right to update the license. As part of rolling out OGL 2.0, we are deauthorizing OGL 1.0A from future use and deleting it from our website. This means OGL 1.0A can no longer be used to develop content for release, end quote. Which is just absolute garbage, but that's what they were trying to do. I will also remind you that the apology, not apology from Wizards of the Coast yesterday still does not say anything about deauthorizing the OGL 1.0A. All it states is everything that was already created under the OGL 1.0A is safe. Doesn't mention anything about deauthorizing it for future use. Although many people have come forward to debate the legitimacy of this interpretation, including former WotC executive Ryan Dancy, who helped write the original OGL 1.0, the FAQ continued to push this language. Additionally, the January 13th update, does not explicitly state that the company will not attempt to deauthorize the OGL 1.0A. I do not believe that the OGL version 1.0A can be deauthorized, Dancy said in an email to Gizmodo. There's no mechanism in the license for deauthorization. When version 1.0A was published and authorized, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast did so knowing that they were entering into a perpetual licensing regime, Dancy continued. All the people involved at the executive level, Peter Atkinson, who was Wizards CEO, Brian Lewis, who was Wizards in-house counsel, and me, I was the VP of Tabletop RPGs, all agreed that that was the intent of the license. While the OGL 2.0A FAQ was distributed across multiple teams inside Wizards of the Coast, sources indicate that this FAQ was not released on January 12th as intended due to the impact of canceled subscriptions and the rising tide of online backlash, or backlash online. The FAQ for the OGL 2.0 also stated that, quote, the leaked documents were drafts and some of the content that people have been upset about was already changed in the latest versions by the time of the leaks, end quote. However, what upset people, including copyright riders and royalties, still seem to be in place in the FAQ for 2.0. The part of the OGL 1.1 that stated once you publish under the OGL 1.1, other people can use your work as well is very similar to the DM's Guild language, explained Jessica Markram, co-creator of Unseelie Studios. But that's not open language, and it seems like they're using the guise of the old OGL to pretend that 1.1 is an open giving license when it isn't. That's something to consider, right? When you publish something on the DM's Guild, you are entering into a contract. That is not an open gaming license. That is a contract that you enter into saying, I'm going to give 50% of my profits to Wizards of the Coast, and I allow Wizards of the Coast to use my content in any way they see fit, with or without credit. You know that going in. The existing open game license is open in that you don't have to submit to anything. You just include the document in, whatever you're producing. Another thing I wanted to go back, I haven't confirmed this, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to ask some of my lawyer friends about this. Some people, this Ryan Dancy quote, right, about a perpetual licensing regime, I saw it a couple of times come up in my live stream yesterday, so again, I can't confirm or deny at this point, that the language of irrevocable versus non-irrevocable in terms of case law possibly didn't exist 20 years ago when the open game license was written. And if that's true, that might be the nail in the coffin in this argument to shut down Wizards of the Coast. If the concept of, because it sounds like, again, perpetual license, when you think of perpetual, you think of it's going to be going forever. We have since learned in our minimal knowledge of legalese here that perpetual means the license doesn't have an end date, whereas irrevocable and revocable means whether it can be walked back. And if something doesn't explicitly state that it's irrevocable, then it is by default revocable. If that language didn't exist in terms of case law until post the creation of the OGL 1.0A, then it obviously couldn't have been in the contract because it didn't exist at the time. Again, that may be just clear conjecture, but we'll see if we can't vet that out. Additionally, multiple sources reported that third-party publishers were given the OGL 1.1 in mid-December as an incentive for signing on to a, quote, sweetheart deal, indicating that WotC was ready to go with the original leaked draconian OGL 1.1. This is what sparked my video in, I think it was on the 20th of December, my first open D&D video, was that I had also heard this and heard from folks who were receiving these NDA contracts, which leads to the conversation that we've all been saying, hey, these aren't draft documents. You sent them out with contracts, and the concept of a sweetheart deal, without driving too much into it's a sweeter deal, right? You're sweetening the pot for you to sign up early. And what everybody had been saying and all the information I had received is if you signed up in the early version of it that was released back in December, or were sent out in December, you got a 15% royalty structure as opposed to the 25% structure that anybody who signed up after the fact would. And then again, it was like 20% if you made your profits through Kickstarter. But I mean, that's a 10% swing. That could be a pretty big difference for some folks. But again, if you're releasing that with sweetheart concepts to it, it's not a draft document. And could potentially this be what Critical Role possibly signed? We don't know this happened. We talked about the statement that they released, which is very clearly, seemingly in it's in favor of the content creator, but they may be locked into various NDAs again, possibly from years ago, or possibly locked in due to sponsorships from D&D Beyond that were ongoing, that they can't speak ill of Wizards of the Coast because they own D&D Beyond. Or perhaps they signed this particular sweetheart deal or something similar that gave them the reduced percentage of royalties. We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. The term sheets. According to an anonymous source who was in the room in late 2022, Wizards of the Coast gave a presentation to a group of about 20 third-party creators that outlined the new OGL 1.1. Okay, this is what I was talking about. This is where I started hearing the information in December. These creators were also offered deals that would supersede the publicly available OGL 1.1. Gizmodo has received a copy of that document called a term sheet that will be used to outline specific custom contracts within the OGL. These sweetheart deals would entitle signatories to lower royalty payments, 15% instead of 25% on excess revenue over $750K, as stated in the OGL 1.1. and a commitment from Wizards of the Coast to market these third-party products on various D&D Beyond channels and platforms, except during blackout periods around WotC's own releases. Well, that's what I was just talking about, the 15%, but I didn't know about this latter part where they were going to purposefully push your products if you signed up early on their various channels, except for a blackout period when they were launching their own content, right? So if they have a book coming out next month, let's say, there'd be a blackout period while they're talking about that book that they wouldn't promote your stuff, but not only would you get a sweetened deal of less royalty percentage, you would also get more promo. So we still don't know what happened to the folks who may have signed that sweetheart deal, but I guess if you start seeing promo for things that aren't from Wizards of the Coast, I could be wrong on this, so take this with a grain of salt. But if we start seeing promotion for stuff on D&D Beyond for third-party content that's not Wizards of the Coast own content, then we could probably assume they are ones who signed that sweetheart deal. Because I imagine if you're locked into that, you're locked in, as it was. There's probably not a lot of room to change that after the fact. It was expected that third parties would sign these term sheets. Noah Downs, that's my lawyer friend on Twitter, a lawyer in the tabletop RPG space who was consulted on the conditions of one of these contracts, stated that even though the sheets included language suggesting negotiation was possible, he got the impression there wasn't much room for change. Getting it right. In its update on the open game license released Friday, WotC promised that the new OGL was still in development and not ready for final release, quote, because we need to make sure we get it right. The company promised to take feedback from the community and continue to make revisions to the OGL that made it work for both WotC and its third-party publishers. But it may be too late. Even if Wizards of the Coast were to entirely walk the leaked OGL 1.1 back, it leaves such a sour taste in my mouth that I don't want to work with the OGL in the future, said Unseelie Studios' David Markowski. Meanwhile, the hashtag D&D Begone campaign encouraging fans to cancel their D&D Beyond subscriptions continues to gain traction on Twitter and over social media sites. In order to delete a D&D Beyond account entirely, users are funneled into a support system that has asked them to submit tickets to be handled by customer service. Sources from inside Wizards of the Coast confirmed that earlier this week there were 5 digits worth of complaining tickets in the system. Both moderation and internal management of the issues have been, quote, a mess, they said, partially due to the fact that WotC has recently downsized the D&D Beyond support team. Wizards of the Coast stated in the unreleased FAQ that it wasn't making changes to the OGL just because of, quote, a few loud voices. And that's true. It took thousands of voices. And it's clear that Wizards of the Coast didn't make the changes purely on their own accord. The entire tabletop ecosystem is holding Wizards of the Coast to the promises they made in 2000, and now fans are setting the terms. Man, Linda just really is comes out swinging with these articles, and this says it all, folks, right? We did it. We said we were going to come out and cancel our D&D Beyond subscriptions. It's not over, though. That's what I want to make sure I stress. This isn't done. They're still hoping that maybe in a month, in a week, maybe even by Monday, people will go in and re-up their D&D Beyond subscriptions and not keep them canceled. You know, that this was just a boycott, a publicity stunt, as it were, and it's just a short-term thing, and that everybody's going to go back to D&D Beyond. They want us to forget, and they want us to just not speak up, and that they can just push through, move on, and continue as though nothing happened. And that is where we, the creators, the D&D community, the tabletop RPG community as a whole, are calling on you, the fans, the players, the game masters, the cartographers, the writers, the artists. We need to stick to our guns on this. We need to keep up the pressure, because things aren't going to change if we just say, hey guys, we did it, and everybody takes a break and relaxes. We need to keep pushing this, right? To quote Gandalf, the battle for Helm's Deep is over, but the battle for Middle-earth has just begun. We need to push this forward. We need to continue staying vigilant. Cancel those subscriptions. Let your friends know. Let everybody know. We're not done, and we're not going to sit idly by and let Wizards of the Coast try to just come up with throwaway statements that don't mean anything and then actually not put anything forward when they actually release this document. I will continue to cover this to the best of my ability as often and as frequently as I can, while also doing things to help lift up and raise up other RPG systems. Talking to Cobalt Press about their Black Flag project. I'll reach out to MCDM. I have contacts over there as well to hear about their game. I also want to continue to talk about things like Pathfinder and other RPGs. And then again, we'll continue to keep our pulse on what's going on with D&D Beyond. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please make sure you do so. And then who knows, maybe we'll do more just chatting kind of live streams so that at least if we're going to be sad and commiserate, we can at least do it together. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.